I hear some cheering over there. I guess that means I know you. So hello. It's nice to see everyone. I'm Brunk, and I am a student here at MSU. And I'm double majoring in neuroscience and psychology, and I also have a passion for writing novels. So tonight, I wanted to talk to everybody about the importance of honoring our artistic expressions because of how closely they're linked with who we are. And I wanted to do that through telling you my personal story about losing my mom when I was 14, writing novels, and the lessons that I learned from that. So, my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 endometrial cancer in November of 2008. And I remember because it was the first weekend of November when my father came down and sat across from me on my bed and told me that this wasn't something that I could run away from. November, though, was also a really great month because it was the month that I discovered NaNoWriMo, which is short for National Novel Writing Month. And it kind of is this really amazing phenomenon that takes the shape of churning out 50,000 words in a month and calling it a novel. And at 14, that was about the craziest thing I had done. And participating in it was something that I was really psyched to do. And I was so excited about this story. And, you know, I was 14, and I was going to write about being 26. And I was sure that I could do it, which is funny, because now I'm 20, which is closer to being 26 than it was then. And I have no idea how to write about being 26. But hey, at 14, I was really ambitious. And I was going to write a story about a woman who, at 26, was really disconnected from her family and was going back to this beautiful island home that she lived in to take care of her elderly grandfather. And along the way, she discovers these letters that depict a secret affair that her mother had had, and which ended up being the reason that she committed suicide a couple of years previously. And I was sure this was going to be a literary masterpiece. And I was so excited about it. In fact, I decided to tell my father about it in that exact moment as he sat across from me on my bed having this really serious conversation. And you know, of course, he was not nearly as excited about it as I was. He looked at me and was like, "Why would you think it would be okay to write something like that?" As though I couldn't write about a woman who lost her mom without assuming that the same thing would happen to me. And I remember being a little dumbfounded and looking at him and just saying, "Dad, why are you so upset? Like, it's just fiction." And this is my first lesson, is that nothing is ever completely fiction. Given any blank canvas, your brain isn't imaginative enough to come up with something out of thin air. So it takes bits and pieces of who you are, what you think, how you feel, what you've experienced, and use that as raw material. This is kind of the reason that projective psychological tests are so valid, is because given an abstract stimulus, your brain is going to project its subconscious onto it, and thereby it can be analyzed. And I realized that the same thing happens in the art that we do. You can look at any artist's larger body of work and see these reoccurring themes that have been left by the mind. And I wanted to take a minute to talk about one of my favorite artists named Miyazaki. You guys probably know he made Spirited Away and Kiki's Delivery Service. I see some nods out there. Whoop, whoop. And today I wanted to talk about two of my favorites, which are Princess Mononoke and Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. Because as I realized this, I saw in his work three distinguishing themes. The first was these really tough, hard-nosed female characters. The second was this overwhelming message of nature conquering technology. And the third are these flying machines in almost everything he does, which is kind of weird. But so in Princess Mononoke, the story is about the industrialization of the forest. And the main character is a girl literally raised by wolves. I mean, I don't know how much tougher you get than that, right? The second one is Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, which is a post-apocalyptic story about this encroaching toxic jungle from man's pollution. And the main character depicts this idea of working with nature instead of against it through every action that she does, and she's a princess. So in light of that, I decided that I wanted to go through my own work and try and find patterns, because I thought if I could find something that if I could learn something about myself in light of my mom's dying, that would give some meaning to something that was otherwise really meaningless. And this takes me to my, slides. It takes me to my second point, which is that our life experiences, they change us, and they change who we are, they change the way we think about the world, and thereby they change the way we produce art. And find patterns, I really did. I found 2 really significant patterns in my 4 novels that I've completed between now and when I was 14. And those were, the first was this overwhelming mother figure, or this presence, in light of the fact that every single main character I had was completely isolated and alone. And the second was this ever-present feeling of loss because of a death or a loss. And in my first novel, this is an example, that the character is a woman named Arizona, who at 13, she woke up in a hospital with no recollection of who she was, who her parents had been, and what her childhood had been like. And one of the huge subplots through the entire novel is her quest for identity, and it's about trying to figure out who you are without exactly knowing where you've come from. My second novel that I've been working on is a story about a recent college grad, and it actually takes a lot of bits and pieces from my own travels in London this summer. And the story is about a girl who has lived her entire life in the shadow of her very famous artistic mother, and then has to deal with the wake of her mother committing suicide. And it's about trying to find out how to define yourself when the person you've always been defined by isn't there anymore. And I think the really important thing to remember about these novels is the fact that they're all fundamentally different. Some are science fiction, some are general fiction, some were written 6 years ago, and some were written a couple months ago. And yet there are these striking unintentional similarities. And I think that's because I've felt these themes so profoundly in my own life. I think, and I know, like, I've grappled with the idea of how do you remain strong enough to shoulder the weight of a loss like this, while still remaining vulnerable enough to let people in underneath the walls that you construct. And, you know, I've written the transition from a character who is so damaged that they can't love anyone for fear of losing them again, to a character who understands that life is too short to stay angry and hurt so many times that I honestly believe I can make the transition myself. My third thing that I've learned from all of this is that endings never really turn out the way you expect them to. No matter how many times you rewrite or redraft, you're always going to end up surprised or heartbroken or scrambling for an extra 20 pages to get it right. And for me, my mother's ending came on February 10th, 2009. We were standing around my living room with her hospital bed. It was me, my father, and my sister. Her college best friend had politely excused himself to break down outside, and my father turned to me and he said, "You should say the things that you need to say to your mother now and then go upstairs," because I was too young to be there, because this wasn't the ending that everyone had expected. And so I did what I was told. I turned to my mom and I said, "Mom, I love you, and it's okay to leave me now." And I went upstairs, even though now I realize that I shouldn't have, because that is one of the deepest regrets that I'll live with, is the fact that I was watching the movie Coyote Ugly when my mother died. But that's kind of the point. Endings never turn out the way you expect. The takeaway from this all is that being vulnerable is really terrifying. You know, it's really hard to look at yourself especially and be vulnerable and take a good long look at the things and the parts of you that you're ashamed of or scared of or wish that could just go away. I know I took a month of mental prep to be able to come up here and tell you all about my personal demons. But those are the parts of us that make us who we are. And we all deserve to know ourselves in that full entirety. And the parts of us that we think make us damaged, in reality, they're victory scars from battles that we've won. They don't make us cowards, they make us warriors. And the part of me that holds me close at night and tells me that I'm good enough isn't the student or the scientist, isn't the girlfriend or the daughter, but the part of me that I discovered when I happened to sit down and start writing a novel. So don't be afraid to look. Before I leave, I wanted to take a minute and share with you all my mom, who was a beautiful soul. It went back, but that was her picture. I wanted to dedicate my talk to her, so thank you.